All right, Jake, how's it going?
It's going good, Colin. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks a lot for coming on here, trying
Oh,
something a little bit
yeah, thank
different
you for
tonight.
having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. I really appreciate you coming on here. Trying a little bit something a little bit different tonight, doing a Zoom recording. So this will be nice because we can kind of do some screen sharing, and Jake can show you
Yeah,
his
yep.
show you his new property and get a little bit better of a understanding and view of it. So that should be cool.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, showing the actual visuals is a little easier than me just describing what it looks like. Yeah, we're gonna put a
Yeah,
food
yeah,
plot on the hill.
yeah,
Yeah, but might be
yeah,
a little
right,
easier to see it
right.
on a map.
Yeah. So you had a busy season?
Yeah, yeah. Consulting wise, and early on in the off season was very busy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did just over like a dozen properties consulting wise. I try to do 2 a month, and then I kind of led that into kind of stop around Memorial Day, give myself time with the family, is also to get my own habitat chores done over the summer to kind of get into the hunting season. I also
Sure.
kind of like to slow it down at that point too, just because scouting gets a little bit more difficult once spring green up hits. It's harder
Oh
to
yeah.
identify those fall patterns. You can kind of see based on topography and
Yep.
habitat change, but a lot of that fresh sign is no longer fresh. So I
Yeah.
really like to tailor my consulting visits, right after the end of the hunting season. So for here in Michigan, like I'll try to kick it off January 1st.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's right on for sure. Definitely is
Yep.
nice when you can see everything's fresh. And then I always tell guys too, can be a nice side of it is when things do green up, if you're good at, identifying things, which I'm trying to be better at, we're all always learning on all our different plants and forbs and grasses and everything.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
is nice. You can identify more, some more natives, your invasive stuff like that when everything's popped up.
Oh yeah, you can kind of tell,
Which is a
yeah,
nice thing.
kind of just the diversity within the area, along with maybe browse pressure as well. Those are
Yeah.
things that you can kind of identify this time of year. Like, okay, there's a lot of vegetation on the ground. I'm not seeing a lot of browse pressure. You probably have a lower deer density,
Right.
or like from a diversity standpoint, like okay, you've got a lot of natives, or like you said, a lot of invasives that need to be addressed. Or in my case here at the new property, okay, you got a lot of fern, so
Oh
your
yeah.
soil's probably pretty sandy.
Yep. Yep. That low pH.
Yep,
Yep. Did
exactly.
you
So yeah, you can definitely see some things now, as like if you scout now as well, that could be indicators of um, positives or things that need more work.
yeah, no, definitely for sure. 100% agree. Did you have you pulled soil tests on your new piece of ground yet?
I haven't pulled tests yet, just because I haven't. Like next year is when we're going to be putting in the food plots, the big ones, and before we get those plots put in, this property, and you'll see it when we kind of share the screen, needs to
Sure.
be timbered. For the most part, the areas on the property that we're going to be putting in food plots are just open hardwoods right now, very mature trees, closed canopy, very little understory. And
Yep.
so we need to have somebody come in to take those trees out. And then I didn't want to get in there and start amending the soil and all that stuff prior to that work being done.
Yep.
So this off season, once that work is done, then I'm going to go in there and, like you said, pull the soil test to start amending the soil. And I think it's gonna be a lot of work. I do know what type of soil that I have, just because I can look at the soil map that's available online, and
Yep.
it's pretty right on. It's a sandy loam,
Okay.
so
Yep.
it's better than loamy sand, but it's not great. Like I went
Right.
from having clay loam to now sandy loam.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
this summer has been really rough. I do have a couple areas on the property right now that I don't know if they're going to be future food plots or not, but
Hmm.
right now, just for this season, I'm going to plant them in food plots just to have some sort of food source on the property.
Yep.
But so I went in, I killed those areas, and then I planted a summer cover crop, buckwheat. It
Yep.
germinated right away, got a nice timely rain, but ever since then, we haven't gotten any rain. So
Oh,
my
man.
food plot is looking pretty sad right now on this
That's
property. We have
tough.
one up north on our other property where we had an existing cover crop of cereal rye, And we
Yeah,
just did the no-till method, broadcast into the rye, smash it down, spray
sure.
it. And that's coming up great still, even with minimal rain. But
Yeah,
this property here, where we're starting from scratch, obviously no existing cover crop, it's pretty sad. So in a couple weeks, I'm probably gonna have to go there and respray it, just kill everything and reset it, and then just maybe lightly drag it, loosen the soil, and then plant my fall crop, and hopefully it goes.
yeah, cool.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who don't know or listening, Jake, if you want to tell us a little bit about your new property. Jake just recently moved on a new piece of property, and that's one of the things we're going to discuss tonight, kind of his layout,
Yeah,
and future plans. So,
absolutely. So we think it was 4 years ago now, we had purchased a property down in Berry County, Michigan. We're trying to, we moved from the Grand Rapids area down to Berry County to
yep,
try to take a 36-acre parcel and kind of turn it into a better piece of hunting property, trying to show landowners here in Michigan kind of, what you can do from scratch. And we took a property, only 36 acres. So it's not like it's a, 200-acre farm, 36 acres. And what was a property that was holding, a few year-and-a-half-old bucks, we kind of turned that into a property that was holding several 3.5-year-old bucks, and a handful of 2.5-year-olds, handful of year-and-a-half-year-old bucks. And then they would be using our property a lot of times during daylight throughout the hunting season. And so we did that in, 2018 to 2021 was the final hunting season. So
sure.
3 habitat seasons, we were able to kind of turn that property around. And
Yeah, and
that
you
was
shout out. No, go
yeah,
ahead.
we were able to take a nice buck off that property last year on opening the first day of the season.
Yeah,
Went back to us, took a chance and went back there and shot one of the 2 3-year-olds that was using the property. And then the
yeah,
other 3-year-old, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to let him go all season and hopefully shoot him this year. But then we decided, out of nowhere, we're like, we're going to sell this property and we're going to kind of move further north, be a little bit closer to family.
mm-hmm.
Our parents have kind of always wanted us to, ever since we moved down there, move a little closer to them. We were a little over an hour away, and that was kind of harder on the grandkids, our children, seeing their
Sure.
grandparents a little bit too far of a drive. So they've been
Yep.
bugging us to move closer, and we were never opposed to it. So we just decided, family is extremely important to us. We are going to be leaving an amazing hunting property, because that it really was an amazing hunting property. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we're going to be kind of starting from scratch. And we found a property in Montcalm County, kind of right on the edge of Montcalm County and Kent County.
Okay.
And it's we have more acreage now. So we went from 36, we have 57 now, but I would say the actual hunting acreage is right around the same, if that
Okay.
makes sense. Based on you'll see this, I know I can explain it better maybe with the picture, but
Yep.
with where the house is located, how the driveway moves through it, there's a pond on the property. It's how the property lays out, the actual percentage of the property that can be dedicated to hunting and to deer is lower.
Yep.
So the actual acreage number is probably around the same. But
Yeah.
we're
So I
excited
mean,
to
just
start. Oh, go ahead, Colin.
no, I was gonna say just from the pictures and stuff that you sent me earlier in the year when we were working together, it looks like it's actually great because it's a lot of predictable deer movement with all those different swamps and elevation and stuff like
Yes.
that. So
Yep,
sometimes that can be
exactly.
better than just a couple big ag fields and stuff like that, or just a wide open
Yep.
flat piece of ground. It can
Yep.
be a lot
Every
more
property is
predictable.
going to be different. And like you said, there's always going to be indicators on how deer want to move through the property. And if it's just a
Yep.
piece of flat ground, like a flat open hardwoods, there's not really any edge that's going to
Yep.
really direct deer traffic. So if you can get just a little bit of an elevation change or habitat change, or like you said, swamps, deer are going to move through those areas in a predictable way. And that can even, like our previous property was in the middle of an ag field, so it was predictable with that in that way. But this
Yep.
one is completely opposite. It is
Wow.
surrounded by cover for miles. So
Wow.
there's not really any, I guess, edge with an ag field, but we do have a lot of edge as it relates to like elevation change and
Yep.
habitat change. So that's what we're
Yeah.
trying to focus on now, is use those edges to create very predictable deer movement, or probably more likely complement the already predictable deer movement that's going to be taking place, and
Right.
push them to those locations, even have a stronger push to those locations to really make them, take those certain trails.
Right. Right. For sure. Turn this light on. Can you see me good?
I can see it good. Yeah, let me,
Can you?
I guess, share my screen then, just so people can kind of see the property here. So let me click screen share.
All right.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and let me know when you can see it.
Yep.
Okay.
I
So
got it.
this is my property, like the area of my property, without any property lines or structures or anything like that.
Okay.
So you can see just from looking at the satellite image here that we have a lot of cover in the area. I can even zoom out a little bit, and you can see, like, this is probably a square mile right here, or maybe a little bit even more than that.
Yeah.
And there is no ag fields ever and anywhere. So there is, as far as a food source goes, like a destination food source or a main food source, there's not really anything in terms of like an ag field. There's a lot of oak flats, which they're probably going to be hanging out in.
Right.
But as far as an ag field, there's nothing like that. So this presents both a challenge and an opportunity.
Right.
Challenge, obviously, there's not really, when you hunt next to an ag field, you know where those deer are going to go. You
Yep.
know that they want to be out in that field, so it creates very predictable movement. We don't
Yep.
have that here, so the movement could be pretty random. Maybe we could have a bunch of red oaks dropping over on this flat, or maybe they're over in this area over here for one reason or the other. But it could be primarily random until we can start getting food plots in.
Sure. Yep.
So here is the property lines with the house and the structures listed. And I think if you can, let me orient it there. All right, so let me zoom in. There we go. So you can kind of see the house here is right in the middle of the property on the southern side.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it really kind of limits the way you can move, or how you should be moving deer through the property, because they do not want to go near that house. Now, that's not to say that they're never going to go by the house, but they're not going to consistently move by the house or the garden shed. They probably will go by the pole barn, but like the areas where there's a lot of human activity, they're not going to want to consistently go near that, especially if we're talking about older deer. So
right.
that's kind of why I have this little red line here. That's about 75 yards away in every direction from the house. And that red line actually pushes into my pond. And so they're not going to swim across the pond, just on the other side of that red line. So that actually pushes the deer all the way to the other side of the pond. So the closest, most likely, that the deer are going to wrap around my house, it's going to be the other side of my pond. And so that kind of is unfortunate, because that's, over 200 yards away from my house. That's going to be the closest, most likely, deer movement around my house from that side. One of the biggest things that we need on this property is food plots. And it's kind of another challenge with this property is there's not a lot of places to put them. You can kind of see we have the river kind of coming through here on the east side of the property. And because this area is kind of low in a lot of spots, it's fairly wet. So you have to, in order to put in a food plot, you got to make sure that it's, one, fairly level, so there's not a ton of slope. You can plant on a little bit of a slope, but you can't, put a food plot on the side of a ridge.
You get a lot of erosion and different other issues.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So you're going to do a lot of issues there, and you also can't plant it in the middle of a swamp, because it's just going to be way too wet. Depending on if you are using equipment or just if it's standing water, you just can't do it. So a lot of this property is either it has a steep grade to it, a lot of slope in like a lot of topography change, or it's wet. So there's only a couple spots on this property that you can actually put in a food plot, because it's it's flat and it's dry. And that's kind of what I'll show you here. First, I'll show you the two plots that I'm probably going to put in this year and where I planted the buckwheat. That's not doing so hot. And that's just right here. So these are areas right now that are currently open. So the previous landowner just kind of had these areas. This is like probably an extension of their yard, an area to enjoy around the pond. But I need to have a food source this year, and these areas are already open. So I'm going to be just utilizing these open areas right now as food sources for this season. And in future seasons, I might use part of them, maybe all of them. It kind of depends on how much food I need. If I find out that I have a higher deer density, like I'm drawing in a lot of deer with the food, then I need to have as much food as I can.
Right.
But depending on how many deer I have, I don't necessarily like that the food right now this is located on the interior of my property. I'd rather have more bedding scenarios on the interior and pull my deer to the outside if I can. But so we'll see what the cards hold in the future. But here are the two food plots that I'll most likely be putting in next year once we get the property logged. So these are areas that are flat and they're dry enough to where I can put in food plots. So they're the only places I can put them in. And I'm not necessarily 100% sold on the how they're shaped, but this is kind of my idea right now. And each one of them is just around an acre in size, like all together. But they also have different sections of the food plot. So you could have deer, like what's this one right here? This is more like a backwards L.
Yeah.
And so you could have deer on one side of the food plot and not be interacting with deer on the other side. Right. If you have a northwest wind and you put a stand right here at the bottom, you're going to be blowing your scent out to the river.
Yep.
And you're going to have the deer wrapping around this corner as they work their way around the food plot. And
yeah.
Over time, this is just a rough sketch. Like I'm going to be having, I have to compartmentalize these food plots a little bit more because it's not, I mean, this, you shouldn't just have an acre food plot without any type of screening or fruit trees or anything like that to kind of break it up, just to make it so these deer can't, see very far, just so they feel a lot more comfortable. And so, but this is like the overall shape of the food plot for right now. Same thing with this one. Different sections of the food plot. We got to kind of lead them off in the different directions. Now, I'll should kind of show you the areas that are wet, just so you can kind of see how we're limited on where we can plant. So this is like kind of a swamp system that runs north to south. We got a cattail marsh here in the center, and then this is just a river bottom that floods. So I can't really plant in any of those areas. So it's a very unique property with how it's laid out and where I can potentially put food plots. But in an area, food plots are important on every property, but they're even more important in a property that is lacking food.
Yeah, so absolutely.
If you're in an area that has no food at all, then food plots are extremely important. And what you're going to find out is if you put in, let's say I just put in a couple quarter-acre plots, they would get mowed down before the rut even started.
Right.
And then I'd be left with no food. And so that's why I need to try to find out a way to put in as much food as possible, while at the same time making sure these deer feel safe within my food plots so they still move during daylight.
Yeah, yep, for sure. And you probably will notice as soon as your hard mass, your acorns and stuff like that, once those are gone, a lot of those deer are probably all going to get concentrated right to a lot of your main destination food plots. Yep. And really take a lot of pressure. So having a little bit more space and have, what's that, a total right around 3 acres on there?
Yeah, I bet you it's right now it's probably right around just under 3 acres, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think that I bet you it's right at 3. I think this one's at 1, this one's just over 1, and these two combined right now are right around 1. So I bet you it's around 3.
Nice.
Oh, It's like that's about 6% of the property ish,
Yeah.
which is not bad. It would be nice to have a little bit more, but there's just not really any space to put it. I could throw some down there by the garden shed, but that just doesn't make any sense because there's so much human activity down there that I don't want to intentionally draw a deer to an area where we're going to be pressuring them. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to be adding pressure where it doesn't need to be.
Right. So these bedding areas that you have marked, are these high elevation, low elevation? How did you kind of set up your bedding?
So the red areas are just like kind of, I would say, swampy areas where they don't need a whole lot of work except for the detail work. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's already getting full sunlight. It's just, you know, dogwoods, tamaracks, alders, you know, just typical swamp trees, willows. So
Yep.
I need to go in there and just do detail work, create trails in and out, maybe find a high spot here or there and flatten them out, make sure that they're ideal for either multiple deer or single buck beds. But the
Yep.
orange areas, those are areas that I kind of marked out that are going to be more the timber bedding areas. Those are going to
Okay.
be when I come and when I have the property logged, those are not going to be clear cut. Those areas are most likely going to be a heavy select cut. So I'm going to take away anywhere from 50 to 80% of the timber, leave the desirable hard mash trees.
Yep.
Just so those are the ones in the north here. That's on the south side of my food plot. So I do need to have a heavy cut because I want to make sure that my food plot's getting a lot of good sunlight coming from the south.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to also make sure that I'm leaving a couple of good hard mash trees in there, just so there is a desire when those acorns do drop, you know, there's still a food source in the area. I don't want the
Right.
deer to always leave my property
Yep.
for the whites or the reds. I want to make sure that I leave enough of them in these bedding areas so they stay here. But all the
Yep.
maples are going to go, all the cherries are going to go. There's a couple elm that will go. There's not a lot of trees right now that are the age or size to hinge cut.
Okay.
Unfortunately, these are all mature trees.
Yeah.
So once
Yep.
it's logged, then I'm going to kind of be in the waiting period of things to kind of restart. But then it gives me an opportunity as well to go in there and plant. So I can go in there and start putting in some conifers to give them some more thermal cover. And so as the early successional growth kicks in, my
Yep.
conifers are growing up with that as well. And so there's going to be a lot of diversity in there.
Yeah, you
But
can go through and like you were saying, put conifers in there for thermal cover. You can even put a lot of bushes and shrubs that are high browse value. So yeah, you can mix in a lot of diversity where other words in a lot of other situations, you really have to deal with kind of what you've got as far as, hinge cut trees. It's typically, what you're doing. And then a lot of times what you come through and, either you're doing a select cut or timber it out and you do a combination hinge cut and select cut. Then once you get a lot of that sunlight in there, then you can kind of start adding in more diversity, but you're going to be able to do that, almost right away. And then the other nice thing, I think you mentioned this before we started this, is you can use those treetops too, and you can kind of create, walls or pinch points and stuff like that with those as more screening, either from, your food plot edge, stuff like that. I know you kind of mentioned that, but
yeah. So I think, once I have these loggers do their work, and then I'm going to try, and hopefully they do it, to try to put all the trash and the tops kind of along the borders of my property, so I can kind of create a screen, like a makeshift screen, until I can get my my screen that I'm going to plant in place. Right. That's going to give me enough structure to kind of work my way around the property, hopefully without being seen. Yeah. And also you can use these treetops too. Like they're not going to drag them all the way from the south side of the food plot all the way to the north side. And so if they leave them down there in the south, and what I can do, I can use that to kind of shield my conifer plantings from any, like if I'm planting, let's say white pines, deer will like destroy those, unless you cage them. So, but you can hide those within those tops to kind of slow the slow the pressure down, especially in a high deer density area, which I'm,
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that with
yep,
several different treetops and stuff like that. It works awesome if you can get in there and plant those seedlings, and it's like a natural cage. Those deer don't even know it, and then it's mature enough, and then by that time they can either reach it or the tree's decayed enough when they can get
yeah,
in
yeah. By
there.
the time the tree breaks down, hopefully that plant has matured to a point where a little browse pressure is not going to hurt it.
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
to get back to your question, I kind of why I like the red areas those are just natural. I didn't do anything to create those. Those are just wet areas, and I just need to go in there and again do detail work. The orange
Mm-hmm.
areas, those are going to be areas that I create myself, and the reason that I put them where they are is, let me kind of I don't really have my access. My access is always going to be around the property edge for the most
Yep.
part. I'm be trying to hunt as much as I can on the outside of my property and look into the interior. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I'm deciding where I want to put bedding areas, most of the time, this is just the way I do it. I know that there's other people that do it differently, and which is totally fine. I know it works. But what I like to do, I like to try to minimize my encounters with deer when I'm walking to and from my stand. So I try to put my bedding areas on the inside of my property so that when I'm walking to and from my stand, those deer are as far away from me as possible. Like they're on the
Mm-hmm.
inside, I'm on the outside. The chances that I'm going to spook them are reduced. Does that mean that
Yep.
they're never going to bed on my property border and I'm never going to spook one? No, I'm just trying to reduce the chance. But
Yep.
I know, like, when I was like, we've done, we've talked in the past, and when we were cutting in the off season, like you were talking just about satellite bedding areas that some people put on their property borders, and I do like I think that's a really cool idea. For me, it just scares the crap out of me. So I just tend to
Yeah.
I tend to put my bedding areas more on the middle. But one thing that people got to understand is there are so many different ways you can do this stuff. There's not one right way. You just got to figure out what way makes sense to you,
Yep.
and try your best to do it that way.
Yeah.
Everyone is
Absolutely.
trying to accomplish the same goal, and there's so many different ways to do it. So
Yep.
if you hear one way that it's like, what, that's not the way I heard on this person's when they explain it, that's okay. If it makes sense to you, just try it that way, because it really does have to make sense to you before you can actually start putting pen to paper and start designing your property. Because if you're trying to do something that doesn't make sense, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. As well as you're probably not going to be near as confident. If it doesn't make sense in your mind,
Right.
you're going to lose that confidence. And everything makes sense, whether somebody's telling you something or you're trying something. When it makes sense, typically you're going to be more confident. You're going to be ready to go when you go out and you try to hunt it.
Yep.
But yeah, obviously, I like that point. Not everything works for every property, obviously, and I find myself, you hear these different things, or you try something different, and you kind of get almost, locked into this one idea or this one way of doing something, and I try to keep pulling myself away and keep myself open minded. Either whether I'm cutting or food plots or screening, all these different things, is just trying to keep an open mind and always keep learning from either properties that I've done or my own property, and experimenting around like we talked about.
Yep.
Um, oh, that's
Let's
cool.
see.
Nice topo map.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to show that as well, just so you could kind of see like why I put the food plots where I did, or why I kind of had to.
Yep.
So this is my house right here from the previous image, and here's like that top. So it's kind of just a triangle here, this flat right here,
Yep.
and so there's only really a little bit of a space here for the food plot. Now this is a really steep edge right here. This one isn't as steep, but it's still too steep to plant. And this little finger here, like that is that's too steep to plant anything on. Back here, this is where we have our other food plot going to be going in the future. And the timber that was kind of towards the northwest, there's too much slope there to kind of get a big one. You probably could get a food plot trail on the top of this one, and so that's maybe a possibility in the future. And then back here behind the pole barn, there's maybe a little bit of a flat spot. You could put something in there, but again, I don't want to have so many different food plots and so many different areas that I'm pulling deer all over the place. So I'm going to probably focus on these areas to start, and it could evolve over time. But I just kind of want to give if people are watching this on YouTube, they can kind of see the topography, because not everyone, it doesn't always you can't see that from a satellite image. So
Right. Oh, absolutely. No, that's a really cool map. Definitely see a lot of other stuff that you wouldn't be able to see over top of the map.
yeah.
So
And then this is completely random, but one thing that these topo maps are good for is, like, this is that river bottom right here that I had kind of shaded in red.
yep.
So when I talk about going in and doing individual detail work, what I'm going to go do is these little high spots right here. These are areas that I want to focus on to go in, find those, clear them out, make sure that they're very attractive for either a group of deer if there's a lot of high spots in one area, or if it's just
Sure.
one single high spot for an individual deer to try to for a bedding area. I want to create as many bedding opportunities on my property as I can to try to make my property as attractive as possible.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely. Yeah, those
these
lone
areas
beds
are.
can be.
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Colin, go ahead.
I was gonna say those lone beds can be awesome if you can get back in those swamps and stuff, and where they, your swamp doesn't come up and completely flood during the fall, and you can get back there and make those little spots, and hinge cut over and make that overhead canopy, or even just making side cover around them, and then making those nice trails heading right exactly where you want them to go. Yeah, those can be killer, especially if you can
Yep.
set up on a stand coming back into another behind downwind of another doe bedding area or something. It's almost like that buck sneak trail. They love using those things.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing that I have never been able to. Like with this property here, you can see the river runs along the east side here, and
hmm
so I'll actually be able to access using the river, because there's not really a good way to hunt this bottom here without having to walk, through the future food plot and down and around, unless I use the river. So I'm gonna have to invest in a boat and then make my way up the river. But then I could hang out right here on this point, or try to find a spot where they're crossing heavily and hang
yep.
out right there just on the down, because a northwest wind, I'm going to be blowing my scent right into the river, and it's going to carry it right away. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a pretty cool spot. I haven't had the opportunity to access my stands that way in the past, so it's going to be kind of a
hmm
cool way to do it on this new piece of property.
For sure. It kind of be almost like hunting public land on the backside.
It is, yeah.
Kind of
That's
go
kind
in
of
and do a
what
hanging
it
hunt or
reminds me of
something.
a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned deer trails, so I'll just kind of share. These are kind of the trails that I'm going to promote right away, and some of them are natural movement patterns, and some of them are what I would consider, they're not natural yet. But we're going to create them. So
hmm
the natural ones are the ones that are always running along the edge of either topography edge or habitat change.
Yep.
So it's kind of tough without seeing the topography map, but you can kind of see the edge here with habitat change. So the red is different habitat from the green, obviously. And I'm always going to be promoting a trail running right along the edge of that, because that's what they want to do. They want to
Right.
run right along the edge. So that's why I kind of have my bedding area here in the middle. And this is going to be broken up with several different trails in the future. I just kind of drew that there just to kind of give you guys a visual on where we're going to be having a section of bedding. This is another hillside here. So we kind of cleared out an area and kind of made a little bit of a bench. Now there was a few different trails that kind of ran along that side, but now hopefully, because we've made a nice easy path along that hillside, that's the path that they're going to take, and it's going to go right to this intersection here. There's a trail that, like an ATV trail, an access trail, just a regular walking trail that leads from from our house basically all the way down to here. And so they take that all the time right now, and so they're going to continue to do that. But this creates now an intersection. So this is a
Yep.
great spot for a mock scrape. and a water hole, because
Absolutely.
we're kind of back, we're on this little point here. And so not only is it a great intersection because all these different edges come together, but we also are kind of back in the thick areas here. And if we have a mock scrape water hole, this is going to be a dynamite spot in the fall, especially if you can get on top of this ridge a little bit, north wind, northwest wind, kind of blow your scent. Now you're going to be blowing it in here a little bit, but if you're high enough, you might be able to blow it over top of that and just let it settle in the river and let the river take it away. So
Yep.
I'm
But
excited.
it could be another great opportunity too, if you can get in there and build some beds in that purple area right there. You could build
Yep.
some beds kind of right in that corner where those bucks are going to want to be downwind of that scrape, and you can sneak along that edge. You can kind of like, we kind of discussed in our time when we were working together, is kind of hunting that fine line, that edge of that wind, making those
Right.
bucks the wind is in their face, and it's actually, in your face too, kind of cutting that fine line. They're totally comfortable, and you can still get away with that wind direction. So that could
Yep.
be a really awesome spot.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. You just gotta, hopefully there's some bucks around here. We'll find out.
You got spoiled at the other property, right?
I know it took a little bit of time, but yeah, we got there. I think
Yeah.
my timeline for any new piece of property is 3 years, because you can't shoot a deer that doesn't exist yet. And if for me, I would love to shoot 4-year-old deer, on a consistent basis, but depending on the area, that might not be realistic. So
Right.
I kind of got to figure out what the cap of this, or what I guess the floor is for this area. What, where should I start targeting these deer? And if we can get to 4 years old, I would love to target 4-year-old deer. But here in Michigan, you do have to be realistic. And if it happened like the other property, it was 3 years old. I just said, I'm going to target a 3-year-old deer. If that happens to be this property too, that's totally fine. But I'm probably not going to shoot a deer that's younger than 3. But if he doesn't exist yet, it might take me 3 years to get him there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like if I'm sure there were 1.5 bucks that survived, so hopefully it only takes 2 years.
Sure.
But in order to shoot a 3.5-year-old deer, he's got to be 3 years old. It sounds stupid.
Right. Yeah. Assuming that you're starting from kind of a blank slate.
Yeah. Assuming it's a blank slate,
Yep.
it might take you that long to get there.
Yep. And also to have a property that's going to allow you to see consistently the deer of the age class, that you're
Right.
going after. That's a lot.
Let's say there is a 2.5-year-old deer here or around this area. He already has a spot that he wants to call home.
Yep.
In order to convince that deer to come over to this property where he doesn't know, let's say you hinge cut or you clear cut an area, we got new growth, hinge cut a bedding area. You have to convince that deer that this spot is better than the spot that he's survived for 2 years. That's going to be pretty tough unless he gets bumped out.
Yep.
So that's one thing I've learned over time is that you kind of almost have to start these deer from scratch and teach them from when they're fawns where they need to go. And mom shows them the path. Mom shows them what trails to walk, where's the food and all this. But then they're going to figure out where to survive. And if the habitat is put in place on your property, then they're going to continue to come back to that same spot that they survived. And the same thing goes with if you overpressure your property. If you continue to overpressure your property and they survive on your neighbors, then they're going to continue to go to your neighbors for that oasis.
Right.
So you need to really be careful on pressuring your property, but also make sure that you provide that habitat on your property so those deer remember this is where they need to go.
Yeah. And I think there's a balance there too, because I think as you increase your habitat quality in, I guess the amount of your overall acreage of your property that you're actually managing, whether it be your bedding areas or just a timber stand improvement, or you've got, tree plantings or food plots or, whatever you've got there that those deer are utilizing. I think the more you can get away with on a property as far as pressure and how far you're pushing in your bedding.
100%.
Yeah.
You're totally right. Like take a 40-acre piece of property that is, let's just say park effect woods, open hardwoods. That might be an awesome piece of property day one,
Yep.
but as soon as you walk on that property, the deer see you come in and they're going to scatter.
Yep.
And because that property doesn't offer anything, and the only thing it was offering previously was safety, they're not going to come back, or at least they're not going to come back during daylight.
Sure.
Like you said,
Yep.
if you have a property that has everything, like a lot of secure cover, different food sources in different bedding areas, you can, I'm not going to say you can overpressure it, but you can pressure it more and get
Right.
away with it more because you can hunt different areas of the property and those deer still won't leave.
Yep.
They'll find a different section of that one property to
Right.
call home.
Yeah, I know a good example is, we were cutting up at that property up north, and
Yeah.
the client came up, after we were done cutting. It was just a 25-acre property, and he came back, wow, this looks like a 50-acre property now. You make kind of a mess, you lay a bunch of trees down, and it creates that organized cover, but it's thick now, and man, it just seems like that property is twice the amount of size,
Yep.
and
You
just
want
makes
to
a
try to
huge
make like a
difference.
10-acre property 40 acres.
Yep, yep, and
Just by
then one
making
of
it
the
really thick.
Yep. Yeah, the biggest thing, I've learned, like I know I was sharing with you that I've learned, and thanks to Jim Ward, traveling around with him, I learned a tremendous amount. And I've been trying to keep building off that as I keep, cutting more and more. But just kind of compartmentalizing that stuff, not only food plots, but compartmentalizing bedding areas. I think a lot of people kind of overlook that. And if you can kind of get more of that screening cover and those walls of cover, it's creating your edge, it's creating your screening, you're separating your bucks and your does, and you can get a lot of the more deer shoved in a tighter or a smaller area, I should say, as well as you can get in and actually hunt closer to those areas, versus you cut a bedding area traditionally, kind of, I guess you'd say, with a clear cut or kind of regular hinge cutting without cutting walls kind of around the side for screening. You really can't get in near as close because those deer are just kind of staring out, right from their beds. So I think
Right.
there's a lot of stuff that you can get away with that, I've learned and I'm continuing to learn that, those mature bucks use their nose a lot. And if you can use that to your advantage, having those bucks, rely on their nose, and they're still bedding high and stuff. And I think I have at it in a lot of properties and try to maximize that opportunity.
Yep. And to kind of go off what you just said, like a lot of people don't, when you don't do the habitat improvement and you're just kind of hunting your property like you've always hunted it for the last 20 years, you don't understand how close you can actually get to a deer without that deer getting up and bolting away if you have great cover. So if you put in
Yeah.
the work and you've created those thick bedding areas and you
Yep.
do have screening cover, and
Yep.
you do have to be, not like you can be talking walking in, you still got to be quiet, you still got to use the wind, blow your scent away from where the deer are, but you
Sure.
can get in, I want to say 50 yards away from a deer and get in your stand, and you're sitting down or you're hanging in your saddle, and then you're sitting there and you watch that deer stand up from 50
Yep.
yards away from within the bedding area that you made in the off season. And
Yeah.
it's like, holy cow, like I had no idea that deer was there. That deer had no idea that I was there, but
Yep.
it works. Like you
Right.
can get pretty close to deer as long as you have the habitat in place.
Yeah. And you did a great job on your last property accomplishing that, and just really compartmentalizing things. I got the pleasure of walking Jake's property. What was that, back in January or something?
Yeah,
This
yeah. I
year?
think you came out in January. Yep,
Yeah. Yeah. That was awesome.
that was fun.
Cool. A lot of work in that property.
It
Most
was. It was a
people.
lot of work, and
Yep.
yeah, my kids are getting older now, so I don't have as much time as I used to have. So this one might take a little bit longer than the other one. That
Right.
previous property, like my son was, I think, 2 years old when we moved over there, and so he couldn't get around nearly as good as he can now. And
Yeah.
now he's still interested in the habitat stuff and deer stuff, but now he's getting interested in more in sports, which is totally fine. Like I love doing that stuff too.
Right.
But now my time is getting pulled in more directions now. So
Oh
this
yeah.
this property not only does it require more work, but I have less time.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
gonna be a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing I'd like to hit on too that you're kind of doing on this property is accomplishing timber stand improvement and also whitetail habitat, because I think that's kind of two different things that I see. Either a property owner is kind of completely doing one or completely doing the other, and so I think more so often, I think it would be better to try to conjoin. You can try to collaborate those things, and actually, you can still accomplish those both of those goals pretty well, depending on the property.
Yeah,
Obviously, some guys all they want is to shoot big deer, and so we cut the property hard, and at least that's why I do it, depending on their goals. And if
yeah,
there's very little timber value there, then that tree is, that low value tree is more valuable to them, or to me, cutting on the ground horizontal, than it is, stand straight up. But yeah, so you're getting a logger out, you were telling me, and explain a little bit about your logging process and stuff like that.
yeah. So I align more with probably with what with you on that. This property right now, it's a beautiful property. It's a lot. It's what a lot of people call a park effect woods.
Yep.
So, and why people call it that is because, like, if you were to walk a county park or a state park and you're walking down the trails, you can kind of see hundreds of yards in every direction. So it's a beautiful property.
Yep.
Very old trees. However, that doesn't really offer a lot for wildlife, especially the prey species, which deer are. They need
Sure.
that. They need that cover, on the ground, probably up to shoulder height, head height on us, and
Yep.
then anything over that, it's kind of getting out of their reach, and it's not really any use to them anymore. So that's what we try to keep the cover more under our shoulder height and down.
Yeah.
In order for that to happen, you got to have sunlight hitting the floor. And so for us on this new property, the first thing that we need to do to accomplish a lot of our goals is to have the property logged, or we'd have to go and cut the trees ourselves.
Right.
And depending on your property and how much you need to cut, and maybe the age of the trees, the tree species, you might have to do the work yourself because no one is interested in the timber value or the age,
Yep.
depending on the species or the age of the timber.
Right.
But we're fortunate here where we do have pretty good timber value to where someone is interested to come out here and take the trees. But yeah, you can do both at the same time. So for wildlife habitat, again, a lot of the habitat is cover. Deer need a couple different things to survive. They need food, they need cover, and they need water, and they also need to be alive. They need safety, and
Right.
safety and cover are very closely aligned. But like a lot of the safety for us, the way we look at it is from a hunting perspective. Like, we need to make sure that we're not pressuring our property. But for deer,
Yep.
they view cover and safety kind of the same.
That
And so in
security
order to
cover.
make sure we provide that cover, we need to make sure that we're getting sunlight to the ground. So we need to cut the trees down.
Yep.
So in order so again, we're having the logger come in, and we need to make sure we're doing both timber stand improvement and wildlife habitat. That's where, like, what I would call a select cut comes in.
Yep.
That's where you're going to remove a portion of the trees, and you and the forester or the logger, however you choose to go about the cutting on your property. You'll discuss this, and you'll write up a contract, decide which trees you're going to be taking, the percentage of the trees you're going to be taking, and you kind of go from there. But when you do a select cut, you're going to be leaving a portion of the trees, so you can still be improving the existing trees on the property by what's called releasing them. Like,
Yep.
right now, our trees are very congested. They're competing with one another for sunlight,
Right.
for moisture in the ground, for nutrients in the ground. But
Yep.
once we kind of remove some of that competition from the area, and we just let's just say we have 3 red oaks next to each other, and we take out 2 of them and leave the strongest one, the
Yep.
straightest tree, and that tree now is going to thrive.
Right.
And not only is that tree going to thrive, but it's going to be allowing more sunlight to the forest floor for regeneration to take place. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what a select cut does, is it helps you free up some of these more desirable trees that you view as desirable.
Yep.
And for me, those are my red oaks and my white oaks. So I don't have as many white oaks on the property here. And so I'm going to probably say, leave all the whites unless there's two of them right next to each other,
Right.
take the subordinate one down, or
Yep.
leave the dominant, healthiest tree there and take out
Yep.
the other one. And
Yep.
they're going to be taking out a lot of the reds. In the areas where I have food plots, that's going to be a clear cut. So that's
Okay.
going to be, there's going to be no trees left. And in the areas that are not going to be food plots, I'm going to have them go through and just select cut a majority of the property, just
Yep.
because the whole thing is mature timber. So I want to get more sunlight to the forest floor to not only create more regeneration for wildlife habitat, but also from a timber perspective, I want my oaks, which are also a food source for wildlife, I want those to maximize their potential. I want to make sure that there's enough sunlight, the maximum amount of sunlight for those trees. They're not competing with other trees for nutrients in the soil, for moisture.
Yep.
They can reach their full potential. And a lot of times those guys will call those legacy trees. Like those are the trees that you're going to have on your property forever. Like,
Right. So I was going to ask, so you don't have much understory trees, do you? Or mid-story, I guess you call them. Some guys call them.
Yeah, there's a pretty defined edge. So again, that presents both an opportunity and a challenge from where we have those red areas on my property, those swampy lowland areas, cattail swamp, to the hardwoods. So it goes from like thick cover to open hardwoods. And so it's a defined edge. So the deer are going to run that edge, but it's also it's not the negative outweighs the positive there, because there's just nothing being offered minus the 1 month out of the year, as long as there's not a late frost for the acorns. And so yeah, we just need to do a better, we just need to make sure we get in there and open up the canopy to let sunlight in, so we do get that understory that we don't have right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a great way, I think I heard this from a logger or a forester, but like 30% of your trees in your forest are never going to make a stick of timber. So an easy way to look at it is you walk into any, if it's got good valuable timber in it, you look at your valuable timber trees basically, and then you say, all right, the other 30%, or whatever that is less valuable.
Yeah.
Basically take that 30% of low valuable trees, and you can hinge them or traditionally fell them and really move them around and build bedding areas and stuff with those 30%. And you're not hurting your timber value at all. You're helping it, because you're opening up. There's a lot of, kind of the understory and mid-story trees. You've got those younger oaks, and then you've got, that are maybe seedlings that are really small. They just got, planted as an acorn. They're just growing from an acorn. And then you've got the next stage, which is kind of your, whatever, let's call them, 15 to 25 foot trees that they're struggling. They're, rough, but you might be able to get, some good timber out of those in the future. They're still decent looking trees. You can open up that other 30%, get rid of those junk trees, and use that for your whitetail habitat. And then you can actually build another layer of a timber harvest in there, because when you're opening up more sunlight, you're going to be growing that timber a lot faster.
Oh, absolutely.
The more sun you can give those younger understory trees. So unfortunately, that probably doesn't fit to your property exactly, because it sounds like you got just a lot of big mature timber.
Yeah, we don't have, it's like you said, it's there's no understory, no mid-story. It's just, large canopy trees.
Yeah.
So when we do get the cut, it's just going to be like those the younger trees right now, the ones that are just saplings. It's going to be off to the races. Yeah. They're all going to be reaching for that sunlight. And me personally, I probably am not going to let most of them get 15. Once they get to 15 feet, I'm probably going to be going in there to hinge them to bring that food back down to the deer level. Yeah, because this property for me is a whitetail property, and a lot of guys or people that I guess that might not be as familiar with whitetail habitat, they might walk one of my properties that like we've done work on, and they'll say, "Ooh, that's really ugly." Like the property that we went on and worked on, and we cut all those trees.
Sure.
Most
Yep.
people that walk a county park would say, "Oh my gosh, what did you guys just do?"
Yep.
But
Yep.
because it looks like a tornado went through, you
Right.
know.
Yep.
But once the sunlight hits the ground, you get that explosion of growth. That is offering so much more to wildlife than all those mature trees. And
Absolutely.
so for me, when I walk my properties, I I see it differently. I think that looks good.
Yeah. Right.
But maybe
Right.
I'm looking at it through a different lens though.
Yep.
So
Yep.
and so for me on this new property here, once the logging is done and any tree that they leave standing that's within my bedding area that's not a white or a red oak, I'm probably going to cut it down. And
Yep.
I'll probably attempt to hinge cut it, as long as it's still of the correct size. But I'm going to
Right.
try to build structure in those areas, move the tops, like you said, to try to create some barriers and funnel deer into certain areas.
Yep.
But it's going to be an explosion of growth once
Right.
that sunlight hits the ground. And then I'm going to have to, I'll be working my butt off just to kind of maintain those areas because
Yep.
it does grow really fast. Now I do think I'm going to have a little bit of an advantage on this property compared to my other one because my other property was like that clay loam soil. It held more water. It grew so fast. I cut something
Yeah.
down. The
Yep.
next year, it was just an explosion. It's still gonna do the same thing here, but I think my
Right.
growth here is gonna be a little slower, just based on my soil type.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and that's a good thing for other landowners to take away too when you're thinking about, doing either a select cut or a clear cut, especially when you know what soil you have, either done soil testing, food plots, that can give you a good gauge of what regeneration you're going to get, first of all, because typically your richer soils, you're going to get a different plant community that's going to come up
Yep.
in those richer soils that like that, and as well as you can kind of manage how your time as far as, okay, I'm going to have to really hit this hard that second or third year, and mark trails out and keep it maintained, as versus you've got a real sandy soil. You say, "Oh, I might have 5 years before I've got to come in and kind of keep maintaining it." Um,
Right. Yep. It's
so
gonna the end result's gonna be the same. It's just gonna take more time or less time depending
yeah,
on your soil type and the
yep,
moisture. So
right, right,
some years you might get a lot of rain and
yep,
you might get a really good growing season. Other years, like this year, at least on this property here, we didn't get a lot of rain yet this
right,
year. So,
yep,
the growing season has kind of been stunted. And
yep,
if we had done our clear cut over the winter, we probably wouldn't have seen a whole lot of growth from our previous cutting. So hopefully next year we get a little bit more moisture throughout the summer, spring and summer, just to help us get off to a good start. But again, depending on the moisture level, that could really determine how much growth you're going to get.
yeah, for sure. Definitely. Well, I really look forward to seeing some more videos of the property. And for those of you who don't know, follow Jake on his what is your YouTube channel, Whitetail Evolution, I believe.
Yeah, Whitetail Evolution LLC. Yeah, same with the website, Whitetail Evolution LLC. I
Yep.
try to put a video out every 2 weeks, but yeah, once we get this place logged, then I should be able to really hit the ground running with more videos. It's kind
Oh
of
yeah.
tough right now to figure out what to do for content, just because like, I don't
Yep.
want to keep putting out the same video over and over again. I want to
Yep.
make sure that it's new. It's a different if it's a different topic. But like right now, really, I'm kind of in a holding pattern until we get this place logged. It's
Right.
really like the same thing over and over again. I'm just really working on like isolating these deer trails and I'm trying to consolidate their movement even further to push
Yeah.
them to these locations.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I look forward to it. It's gonna be cool. That's definitely a unique piece of property. I think you're definitely taking
Yep.
full advantage of the terrain features and swamps and everything like that. Sounds like you got an awesome plan.
Yep. Yeah. Hopefully it comes together.
Yeah.
We'll see. Time
Yeah.
will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Well, if you don't have anything else you wanna add, I really appreciate you coming on here, and maybe in the near future we'll do another one, maybe a follow up property or
Oh, absolutely.
something
Yeah.
like that.
I
So
appreciate you having me on, Colin. It's always fun talking to you. Yeah. If you ever want to chat again on anything else, yeah, we can definitely do this again. So I love talking about this stuff.
Me too. That's awesome. All right. Well, I will hopefully talk to you soon. I appreciate it again. And thanks, viewers, for everybody for tuning in. And we will catch you in the next episode.